Hello once again. Welcome to the show. It's Dan here. I'm on my own. Very briefly, you'll hear from Jack and myself in a moment, but I just need to interject with a little correction. Jack and I got a little overexcited and were a little overzealous in our efforts to interpret some of the events you're about to hear about. We misread some things and used an overactive imagination slightly to embellish a exciting enough, intriguing enough story. You're about to hear us in a moment talk about United Airlines Flight 553, which crashed outside of Chicago on December 8th, 1972. Killed in the plane crash was Dorothy Hunt, wife of Watergate burglar Howard Hunt. In the plane crash, of the 61 people on board, 43 were killed, 16 were injured, but there were also 2 fatalities and 2 injuries on the ground. And in our misreading, we interpreted what we were being told to suggest that Dorothy Hunt was one of the ground fatalities, when in actual fact she was on the plane. Conspiracy theories abound around what happened to Flight 553. They seem to center on the proposition that there were numerous people on board the flight who had some connection to the unfolding Watergate scandal, 12 in all. And so the suggestion is that there were a whole series of political murders, political assassinations that took place and were disguised as a accidental plane crash. I've got to say, it sounds a little outlandish to me, but one never knows. That said, all that out the way, welcome once again to the show. Thanks for listening. Let's get to it.
We're back. My arm's starting to hurt.
Okay.
I got it. I did the thing.
Oh, your job. You did.
Yeah, I did the thing you said and just relaxed my arm like that. I think it was definitely better. Now it's starting to.
Okay, hit me with it, Jack.
All right.
H. Howard Hunt.
Here we go. Okay, so H. Howard Hunt, classic Watergate burglar guy.
That's a type of person.
Yeah, he's a Watergate burglar guy.
He's that kind of guy.
He's just a dude.
The new type of guy.
When explaining Watergate, David Talbot opens it with, like, this reminds me of nothing other than, like, the Simpsons episode where Bart's trying to sleep and Homer's like, wakes him up and is like, you want to see my new chainsaw and hockey mask? This story rocks.
Yeah,
so
like
much.
I got like a sentence and a half into it and I was like, wait, is this Watergate? And I was
Yeah, so H. Howard Hunt's son is called Saint, just so you know.
Saint
fucking
John.
Weird. Yeah, Saint John. Okay. Late one night in June 1972 at the family's Witches Island home, which, okay, that's on the nose, in suburban Maryland, St. John was frantically, Hunt had frantically woken up his 18-year-old son, and he said, I need you to do exactly as I say and not ask any questions, said Hunt, who was in a sweaty and disheveled state that his son had never before witnessed. Oh, God. Jesus Christ, that's traumatizing. He ordered St. John to fetch window cleaner, rags, and rubber gloves from the kitchen and help him rub away fingerprints from a pile of espionage equipment, including cameras, microphones, and walkie-talkies. Later, St. John helped his father stuff the equipment into 2 suitcases, which they loaded into the trunk of his father's Pontiac Firebird, and then they drove down through the darkness to the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, where they got out and tossed the suitcases into the murky water below home. On the way back home, Hunt told Saint that he had been doing some special work for the White House and things had gone south. so many bits of that are just like, I don't know. That's the best way to get rid of them, is just toss them in a river in suitcases. Why couldn't you have just wiped out the fingerprints yourself? Why did you drag your son into it? Like, so much of it is like, damn, this guy's like, He was probably pretty good back when he did the Guatemala coup, but like, I don't know, man. Like, he's losing it a bit here.
So was he there, or did he arrange? He arranged the other guys, right? He wasn't one of the ones that was caught, because some of them were caught on the scene.
Yeah, I always thought he was, but I suppose he wasn't.
I think it does give the names of the 4 people that he's. Like,
yeah. So the next paragraph is, it was the beginning of the Watergate drama in which Howard Hunt played a starring role as the leader of the White House plumbers, the 5 burglars who were all arrested during the Democratic breaking into the Democratic Party's national headquarters. So yeah, it was all 5 of the guys had a history with Hunt, and Hunt, you're right, was organizing them. Okay. One of them was Frank Sturgis, who we'll come back to in a minute. Okay, the CIA killed Kennedy, whatever. That's not that crazy. This next bit, Dan, makes me lose my mind whenever I talk about it, dude. Because, like, either this insane coincidence happened, or the CIA orchestrated what I'm about to say. And I think the, like, former is the crazier thing.
Yeah. It would be the most ludicrous, like, hit ever conducted.
It would be. And it makes... Okay.
So Howard Hunt, about to be caught and is going to go to prison.
Yeah, sure.
And is becoming legitimately a bit alarmed, particularly for the welfare of his family. Starts saying some sort of like alarming things in the direction of the White House, particularly suggesting he kind of knows where the bodies are buried. He has information around the Bay of Pigs, quote unquote. Yeah. A little bit of speculation as to what he actually means by
that whole Bay of
Bay of Pigs thing. This is in the early 70s, obviously.
Yeah, Nixon's president. Yeah.
So he starts making demands of the White House that he needs to be looked after, basically.
Yeah.
How much does he demand? $2 million.
Apparently $2 million, which is insane.
Yeah. Demand, request, I don't know. Make a legitimate claim for.
Yeah. And as we know...
Invoice for $2 million.
Yeah. And as we know,
expensive plumbing job.
From our last episode, does Nixon have access to very sketchy, perhaps fascist-connected Romanian campaign money?
Yeah. Nixon has become into possession of bags of cash on quite a number of occasions in this book.
Yeah, and so basically there are Watergate tapes of like Nixon in his office talking about this with Haldeman and being like, okay, holy shit, Hunt's going to uncover a lot of things. And Haldeman's kind of like, haha, what? And Nixon's like, he wants money, let's just give him some money. Okay. So what happens next is presumably Nixon gives Hunt's family this money. Fast forward to, I guess, like not too long later, when Howard Hunt's wife and St. John's mother...
Just so we're aware, this is another tragedy we're making light of.
Yeah, but it's so fucking... Like, if this happened to me, I would expect people to do this. Yeah. So Dorothy Hunt was just hanging out at their suburban house, and she was in possession of this $2 million, which Talbot makes the claim that that money can be directly... traced back to Nixon's re-election campaign fund, right? She's just hanging out, vibing, counting her money, and a commercial airline flight, and I'm not making this up, I think it's flight 553 or flight 533, just look up Howard Hunt's wife, plane crash, because a fucking United Airlines plane is supposed to be landing at Chicago's airport and just crashes into her home, killing, like, everybody on board, of course, and like a couple other people on the ground and her, and the money just goes everywhere, and it's just like I don't, this is the shit that, like, if this is a psyop to be like, guys, let's just make this hit so insane that it'll make Jack go insane in 50 years, that like it works, dude, because it is so insane. Like I said, either this is like the most ludicrously organized hit on the planet, and or it's a coincidence, and if it's a coincidence, that makes me even more insane. It's so nuts, dude. It's just like, did the CIA like take control of a plane and crash it into it? Just go shoot her. Like, what?
And why kill her? Kill Hunt, for God's sake.
I know. It's like, yeah, dude, it's so crazy. That whole thing is so insane. And then Talbot just kind of moves on. And he's like, yeah, that was wild. When my wife died in that plane crash that only crashed into her house. It's like, okay. All right. That's batshit insane. And okay, so then we should frame this also by saying that this is all coming out because Howard Hunt later in his life, in like the early 2000s or whatever, when he was just like a sad old man in his house watching Fox News, his estranged son.
Surprise, surprise. St. John has some questions.
Yeah, St. John's like, so I feel like you killed Kennedy.
Yeah. Because his dad is one of the central like prime candidates, I suppose, prime suspects along the way. Obviously, there are many and myriad investigations, official and independent research based.
The best kind.
The best kind of investigation. And he emerges as a like key candidate person who is speculated upon.
Yeah.
Is that right?
He's one of these Nexus people.
Yeah.
And
he's kind of thrown under the bus at one point as well. Don't even the CIA kind of... No, I get it wrong. There is a point in time when the CIA... I think this is during the like House Commission.
Either the Church Committee or the Rockefeller.
There was one in the late 70s, which was basically just called like
the Church
the House Select
Committee
Committee on Presidential Assassinations or something. And there's a period of time where the CIA are not entirely sure where it's going to go, and they are contemplating the possibility that they might have to throw some people under the bus.
And they're like,
their prime candidate's like, we'll finger Hunt and a few other people. We kind of know who they are, and like, we'll shove them out the way, kind of thing, or shove them in front of the cameras,
in front of the plane,
in front of the plane, which also speaks again to like these class dynamics, right? Like, Hunt and Harvey in the same way, like, definitely thought themselves like close to the center of power in these institutions, but they were really never anywhere near like the commanding heights of this situation. They were always pawns on Alan Dulles' chessboard.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, and I mean, I think also the fact that he asked for a shit ton of money from Nixon didn't endear him to anybody. And so anyway, I mean, St. John later in his life, this bit, Talbot paints it as completely legitimate, and like H. Howard Hunt's testimony is like realistic and real and whatever. I have heard like other people kind of say that it's a bit sketchy. Regardless, Hunt says some pretty insane stuff, and the like testimony that he gives about being involved in the Kennedy assassination, St. John tries to sell to a number of news outlets, and nobody will take it, and eventually the Rolling Stone takes it. And it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, Talbot is particularly irked, I suppose, that this, what he thinks as sort of like almost ironclad confession doesn't really get taken. This is in the early 2006 or something, so like very recent. Doesn't really get taken up as being a serious thing. And I guess a lot of the central, like obviously Talbot has issues with Hunt's description of events, but at the same time Talbot does take it quite seriously as the bare bones of what actually happened kind of thing. A lot of stock is put on this deathbed confession from Howard Hunt. Yeah,
and I mean, it's interesting. I guess you got to look at his motives. Like, he's dying, so it's not like he's doing this for money or anything. But also, like, he's also dying. So, like, who knows? It does seem like the story that he tells is very possible. And I mean, I don't know. That's the thing with all of this. It's like when you try and get down into the nitty gritty, it's like, okay, we all know that like the CIA and the mafia and whatever were all involved in this plot because the bourgeoisie like hated Kennedy. More than that, it's just kind of speculation. But he gives a very interesting story, and it's kind of exactly what you'd expect, honestly. He makes a point that like he was invited to a meeting between him and this guy Frank Sturgis, who we've said who would go on to be one of his, one of the Watergate burglars. Who at this point was just like, he calls him a soldier of fortune. David Talbot calls him a soldier of fortune. But there's another guy there named David Morales, who's like, an anti-Castro guy again. And they basically just say, hey, Bill Harvey is organizing a campaign to kill the president. Are you in, bro? We have some like anti-Castro Cubans on our side, and we've got some mafia guys on our side because of Harvey. You want to do this?
Oh, yeah, and it's been okayed by LBJ.
Yeah. Oh my God. Exactly. Well, and that's the point. That's like Howard Hunt is like initially like, yeah, I'm not down to like do something with Harvey. He's like a drunk, like fat cop. Like, I'm not down for that. And Frank Sturgis basically says like, yeah, but this comes from the top, like implying Dulles and also kind of implying LBJ actually, which is insane. Don't know how much I believe the LBJ stuff, but the Dulles stuff, of course.
Yeah. All the LBJ stuff is like, it not even circumstantial. It's just like who would benefit.
Yeah.
Obviously, Lyndon B. Johnson, because if we don't know, he was Kennedy's vice president and he became president.
Yeah.
His political career was definitely on the down and out kind of thing. He was a waning star who got onto the ticket because he shared very little with the Kennedys and had actually told his, ironically, his like, because he was from the South, his sort of like oil baron backers had told them that there was not a chance in hell he was going to join the Kennedy ticket because he had been the presumed front runner in the Democratic primary in 1960 until like Kennedy overtook him and won the primary, and then eventually he did acquiesce, I suppose, to being Kennedy's running mate, and then told a friend of his afterwards that he'd looked at the stats and had seen that 1 in 4 presidents die in office. So, like, this is pretty good odds. He's a gambling man, he said. He's a gambling man. It's a pretty good way to potentially rehabilitate his career. And even more, like, poignant than that, I suppose, he had associations with a congressman, I think, who was beginning to be embroiled in this massive scandal, corruption and like prostitution and all the things you would expect. And basically, LBJ was about to be implicated in this scandal basically on the day that Kennedy was killed.
Yeah.
So obviously it's not to say that Lyndon B. Johnson knew or was involved in the plot, but like, if there was somebody who was most immediately going to gain materially, it was definitely Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yeah.
And also, like, with his connection to the, like, oil firms, he was definitely, like, this particularly active and involved section of American capital's favorite candidate to be president.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the way I read it, because like there is the mention of like the meeting that he had in his Dallas ranch with Dulles like several days before the assassination, which is a little insane. But also like, I don't know. I don't think you necessarily need to think that he was in on it at all, because it's like okay, if I was Dulles, all I would do is just be like, okay, you don't need him to know what's going to happen. You just need to say like, if something were to happen, would you be on board to be our guy and not do some of the shit that Kennedy did? Because, you know, you'll see what happens to people who do stuff that Kennedys do. So it's like, I don't know, need to know basis if you're running an operation like this, I feel like. And like, it doesn't matter because at the best, or at worst, he was complicit. At best, he was just like, yeah, do what you're going to do. And then like knew about what happened after the events and didn't say anything because holy shit, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
But also we need to say like, at the very beginning of Kennedy's presidency, Johnson made this really weird request to like have unprecedented powers over the entire national security apparatus, Talbot says, including the Defense Department, the CIA, the State Department, and the Office of Civil Defense and Mobilization. And Kennedy just like was like, what the fuck? Like, and didn't even respond to it. Like, of course I'm not going to give you that. So that's a little sus. He's like, hey, can you put me in charge of the CIA?
Somebody Talbot quotes says that this is basically the most outlandish request any vice president has ever made of a president.
Yeah.
And as you say, like Kennedy's like, what the fuck, mate? This is not happening.
It's not going to happen.
So yeah, it's worth highlighting that because, like, yes, not only was Lyndon B. Johnson heavily connected to like Southern oil barons, he was also very heavily connected to the defense establishment, to the CIA. There is a reason why he wanted to be given powers in this realm, kind of thing, because those were the interests that he represented. Read into that what you will.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's this whole thing. Read into it what you will.
Yeah.
Like, all right. So then, I just want to read this just because this is classic. When we're talking about H. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis and Bill Harvey organizing a lot of this stuff, we should also say again, like, to emphasize that like Howard Hunt was not going to do it because he was like, you know, these people who are all involved seem extremely sketchy and this doesn't seem like it's going to work. I'm out, dude. Don't worry about it. But when he realized that like Dulles was the person at the top, he was in on it. And after that, you just get this, when you get the actual descriptions of the people who are involved, you get this classic bit that Talbot says, where he says, while assembling Castro assassination team, this was Harvey, he reached out to a variety of underworld professionals, including the infamous European assassin codenamed QJ Win, whom the CIA had recruited to kill Patrice Lumumba. And then he goes on to say, in fact, among the strange and murderous characters who converged in Dallas in November 1963 was a notorious French OAS commando named Jean Sutre, who was connected to plots against de Gaulle. Sutre was arrested in Dallas after the Kennedy assassination and then deported to Mexico for some reason. And then de Gaulle was like, what the fuck, I'm about to go to Mexico. Like, this guy's tried to kill me many times before. Why did you do that? Which I think is very funny. Little suspicious. Suspicious that he was just there. But so is everybody, as we've said. All right, and then I guess we need to talk about the final
yeah.
boy.
Well, also there is the point in the period of time, basically, Hunt basically gives some names, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Of like, he basically names the assassins. He suggests that he is like on the benches kind of thing. And one of the things that Talbot's a bit suspicious of is like Hunt is very keen to implicate Harvey. Like Harvey is the quarterback.
Yeah.
And Hunt is like... Hunt is just on the bench kind of thing, on the sidelines. He's really keen to downplay his own involvement. One of the people he names as an accomplice in the plot is someone whose name I've forgotten. But he has particular reason to be disgruntled at Kennedy. Not only is like an ardent anti-communist and ardent anti-Castroite, and so shares all of the same sort of like ideological sentiments of this milieu that we are now familiar with, but also his ex-wife, who was quite a sort of like famous artist, had then gone on to be a mistress of Kennedy's.
Yeah, that is so funny, dude. That's so funny.
Yeah. In sort of like contemporary parlance, he feels to me like the ultimate wife guy who decides he needs to go and kill his ex-wife's new boyfriend.
That's ultimate wife guy. Yeah, I mean, that just sets up basically everything that happened. But I mean, I guess we need to talk about
history's famous patsy.
History's most famous patsy. And man, you come away from this feeling so bad for Oswald. Like, I don't know. This is Talbot's kind of own agenda too. But like, man, Oswald in with a bad crowd from like day one, and like seemed just like a nice guy. You know, he seemed kind of smart and like deep thinking, kind of a loner. But like, man, sucks that he got shot.
Yeah, Talbot's whole take on it is that there's a lot of weirdness going on with Oswald. Yeah. There are so many question marks. We just really have no idea what the actual background of the story is, other than like the key events, of which there are many, and basically just raise more questions for the most part. I mean, it's a sad story from the offing, isn't it? Like, he's raised by a single mother who basically can't cope with him and his two brothers. He's sent to a like famously horrible orphanage for a little while. I should say he's like born and raised in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Goes to this famously horrible orphanage where it's quite likely that he was at least witness to abuse of children. His family then moves to Chicago, where he becomes this sort of like famous truant. And is at one point sent for some kind of psychiatric evaluation. And this kind of evaluation, the person who evaluated him psychiatrically would then go on to give quite damning evidence in the Warren Commission, painting him as basically the psychopath everybody wants to see him as. But also, he is also identified by other social workers there as being actually quite intelligent and having pretty good reason to be truanting from school. I mean, he finds it boring and he's just bullied by the other kids. They take the piss out of him for being from the South.
Yeah, join the club.
Pretty like normal things for sort of like somebody from that kind of background from reduced means that might be suffering.
Yeah.
And it basically continues from there. He seems to become something of a fantasist, becomes pretty obsessed with like elaborate lives, with sort of like spy plots to some extent, with the idea of like having important missions, with living multiple lives. He's really infatuated and fascinated with like a particular TV program, which is about somebody who's like some kind of secret agent of some sort.
Yeah.
And he's really sort of fascinated with lives that are very different from his own mundane one.
Dude, that's so sad, man. That's just because that's how everybody feels.
Yeah.
And it's like
this is the thing that makes you so sympathetic toward him, or so you identify with him so well. It's just that like it's just looking for his place, you know?
Yeah, well, and he's looking to like be in society what like everybody's expected to be, which is like the Ayn Randian, like your own man, and like, you know, no altruism, and, you know, like you just want to be a hero. And it's so sad, dude, because he just gets taken advantage of every single step of the way. It's so brutal, dude. I mean, yeah, one of the main things, and like Talbot kind of implies this might be where he kind of got his first CIA connections, or at least like a lot of CIA people saw someone that they could use, was in this thing called the Civil Air Patrol, which was like this extremely creepy, like youth cadet thing where like, I'm just going to read this bit too, because this is freakish and disgusting. David Ferry, ultimate guy, the Eastern Airlines pilot who supervised the local Civil Air Patrol chapter, was a particularly eccentric personality. Suffering from alopecia, Ferry took to wearing an ill-fitting reddish wig and filling in his missing eyebrows with theatrical slashes of grease paint. Don't know what he was going for there. Catholic educated, he led a secretive and tortured life. He liked to practice hypnosis techniques on young cadets under his command, and he tried to lure them into a drug research program at Tulane University, to which he was connected. A passionate anti-communist, Ferry threw himself into New Orleans' steamy anti-Castro politics. After the Bay of Pigs debacle, he denounced Kennedy with such vicious abandon, blah, 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 blah. He basically just said somebody should kill Kennedy. But this is like where Oswald winds up, and like so many people kind of like this, he's just like, I'm gonna join the military. So he joins this like Civil Air Patrol, totally gets taken advantage of. David Ferry has all of these sketchy connections to not just anti-Castro Cubans, but like he's implied that he's one of the people flying the planes to like move these guns around, move supplies around to people in New Orleans and stuff. And it just gets worse from there for Oswald, honestly.
Yeah, he does join the Marines, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Spends some time at an Air Force base in Japan where U-2 flights are flown from.
Dun, dun, dun.
And also that air base might be another place where like CIA were operating out of. He may well have received some kind of training there.
Yeah. Well, he does a lot of really weird things.
Yeah, he basically absents himself from his military service by lying to say that his mother's ill.
Yeah.
Goes back to America and then goes to Finland.
Yeah.
And despite having no money, stays at some very lavish hotels in Finland and then executes a plan to defect to the Soviet Union. So he gets on a train and goes to Moscow.
We should say, too, at that airbase, though, at Atsugi, which was in Japan, Talbot makes the point that this was like a hotbed of CIA, like LSD techniques, because they were operating so many spy programs out of there that like they would dose up operatives who were going to go to the Soviet Union. This is such bullshit, but they'd be like, if we give them LSD once, they won't crack under pressure. And it's like, I don't know if the Soviet Union was like giving people acid to like get them to crack, but like, all right, whatever, dude. And he kind of implies that Oswald might have been one of these guys, and that maybe perhaps he got instructions to defect, quote unquote, to the Soviet Union, as you're saying, as part of like a bigger plan, which again, who the fuck knows?
Yeah, there are several occasions in this story of Oswald's where he does some things that look very staged.
Oh, sure, yeah.
One of them are the circumstances of his defection. He goes to he goes to the U.S. Embassy or something and makes a big point of having it known that he intends to defect to the Soviet Union because he's been on this spy base where U-2 planes were flown from. He intends to divulge state secrets to the Soviets. In a way which is dude. And everyone's like, okay. So yeah, then he goes and lives this 2.5-year life in the Soviet Union.
Gets married.
Gets married, has a job in a radio factory. Yeah. Has some friends.
Yeah. It seems like honestly a cool time.
Yeah.
Gets in some fights.
Yeah. Like this is the thing where he like, I mean, this has been revealed about his character already, but he's just like a bit of a dreamer, but also like somebody who's really interested in ideas and like speculating on philosophy and that kind of thing. He has one particularly close friend in the Soviet Union with whom he debates the various merits of living under US capitalism versus Soviet communism and like have this various philosophical discussions, gets into some arguments from time to time. Yeah. One of the things his Soviet friend says about him is that he never actually fights back in any of these fights, and it's very hard for him to imagine him ever hurting anyone.
Yeah.
That may be truthful, or it may be an incredibly elaborate form cover for
Cover for cover for cover.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, either this is like the most elaborate construction of a character, or it's somebody who's not quite sure what they're doing, is being guided in some ways, but not in others. That seems like the more plausible scenario. Is that like?
Well, it's like, how many of these people have we not heard about? The people where it's get to a point where one day they have some weird credentials and we can use them for something if we want, put them in a position to do it. Because there is also the point where like one of the factory guys takes him out hunting, and they said that there was like a rabbit 5 feet in front of him and he couldn't hit it with his gun, and he was just like, all right, fucking Jesus Christ, I'll just shoot it for you, goddamn.
I mean, this is another example of like David Talbot setting up in earlier phases of the book CIA and Alan Dulles' kind of modus operandi when he's describing Alan Dulles' relationship to people like the Fields and Frank Fields, and how he befriends and exploits these people who are sort of like tacitly connected to intelligence circles and also sort of in friendship circles with them, but at the same time totally disposable and expendable. You make the very astute point that like we don't know how many of these people existed who like were never given some kind of role in history kind of thing.
Yeah, because like how useful would it be to just have a selection of people who have defected to the Soviet Union? Because I mean, like they talk about the KGB are like obviously following this guy because they're like, this guy's CIA, what the hell? Yeah. And then he just does nothing, and they're kind of like even at points where like they give him opportunities to like snoop around secure areas, he does nothing, and they're like, well, either this is like they're trying to trick us, or like he's just an idiot who succumbed to like, I'm going to go defect to the Soviet Union. And it's like, they're just kind of like, what? Who is this guy? So they just don't really bug him. They're like, yeah, if he wants to make radios for us, go ahead. Yeah.
And then he undefects.
Then he undefects, as you do, after he gets a wife, and he brings her back. And then he makes the point that it's like, it was extremely easy for him to get back in the country, and nobody asked him any questions at all.
Yeah, it took like months for the FBI to come and even like talk to him.
Yeah, like, why did you lie about your mom being hurt? Very easily
gets a passport for his wife to come into the country as well.
Yeah. And another very odd thing is that this guy named Antonio Veciana, who was one of the guys who organized Alpha 66, which is like, again, one of these cute, like American anti-Castro Cuban organizations that would just go strafe people in seaside villages on boats. He openly said, like later in his life, like, yes, I was trained by the CIA, and everybody knows that Oswald was too. He was also trained by the CIA. So, you know, there's that. A ringing endorsement. And then, yeah, I mean, he's also, in October of 1963, he gets downgraded as a threat to national security because, like, everywhere he went, everything that he did, there would be a little note that would go to all, like, local FBI agencies as being like, hey, this guy's clearly up to something. Keep an eye on him. And in October of 1963, all of that stopped because I said, don't worry about it. He's just an idiot.
Both the CIA and the FBI basically ceased any amount of surveillance or tracking on him, like a month before the assassination.
Yeah.
But there was another example of like his seeming to concoct peculiar scenarios, which could be very easily taken note of and then recalled by people later on.
Yeah.
There's a period in time when he associates himself both with a pro sort of solidarity campaign for Castro and Cuba, and then also some anti-Castro people. And then when he's caught giving out pro-Castro literature by some anti-Castro advocates,
youths. It's like thugs. I don't know.
Yeah. He is like accosted by them in the street, and they make this big scene so that everybody can notice. And he doesn't like fight back or have it out with them in any way. So it seems like another one of these scenarios where like he can be seen to be acting in a pro-Castro manner, so that people can easily recognize it in the future, kind of thing.
Yeah. He also goes to Mexico and is like, hey guys, I would like to go to Cuba now. And everyone in Mexico is like, what the fuck? Get this guy out of here. And then he goes back home. And there are also a series of events where like Oswald, quote unquote, makes phone calls that were really suspicious. There was even one point where it was like shown by one of these anti-Castro Cuban guys. It was like, supposedly he was again giving out leaflets or doing some sketchy stuff. And he was like, oh no, that wasn't Oswald. That was somebody looked nothing like him. That was like some big fat guy.
There was somebody going around masquerading as Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Presumably to continue to concoct this narrative about Oswald and his activities
Yeah.
as a sort of like pro-Cuba
Yeah.
activist.
The Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
Yeah, it's a good name.
It is a good name. We should start that. Okay, and then the narrative kind of cuts out for Oswald for a bit until they get into like all the sketchy ballistic stuff. And he brings up David Talbot brings up a couple different things. One of them is the Rockefellers, dude. Oh my God. This is like classic, you hear the Rockefellers name come from conspiracy theories and you're like, yeah, okay, it's like the Soros thing. Yeah, okay. But it's like the Rockefellers, dude. What a bunch of scumbags. Holy shit. So David Rockefeller, I didn't know this. During World War II, he was stationed in Northern Africa, as a spy for the OSS, but not to keep an eye on the Nazis, to keep an eye on the like nascent anti-colonial movements. That's insane, dude. That's absolutely insane. And then after the war, they send him to Paris to like start like smacking down communists. And de Gaulle is like, yo, get this guy out of here. Like, I don't want these Americans wandering around pulling shit that I don't know about.
What I learned from reading this is if you went to a certain collection of US universities and you came from selection elite circles in US life, during World War II, you were some kind of espionage agent. You either worked for the OSS or you worked for some other kind of analogous intelligence gathering institution.
Yeah.
That just seems like the role that they all took up when they were during World War II. And those networks seem to come to influence basically the rest of these people's lives in terms of like how they fit back into American society and relate to one another.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because I think, was it Nelson Rockefeller tried to become president and failed dramatically, and like everyone kind of didn't really wind up carrying.
Yeah, was Nixon's running mate a Rockefeller?
I think so.
No, I know. I think the story, as it unfolds in this, it's alluded to the fact that a Rockefeller is preparing to run in the 1964 election. So presumably he loses in the primary to Nixon.
But that's what it was. That's what it was. Because I think he was one of these guys who was like, I come from money, and we had our goddamn stuff stolen by Castro and the Cubans, and I earned this. I went to the right school. I should become president. And then you lose to Nixon. Like, dude, just quit.
Yeah. I have no sympathy for this guy because, like, what he apparently says is, like, I come from all of this wealth.
Yeah.
What more is there for me to aspire to than to be president?
Yeah, exactly.
Your only motivation is it's the one thing you feel you cannot buy or have, at least.
It's disgusting. They're like, we're outsourcing that to actors now. Okay. We don't want any actual people. And one name that comes up quite a bit in this is you've heard this in the news for the last 20 years, folks, the Council on Foreign Relations. Dun, dun, dun. So Talbot says one of the principal arenas where this consensus took place was the Council on Foreign Relations. The Dulles brothers and their Wall Street circle had dominated this private bastion for shaping public policy ever since the 1920s. Over the years, CFR meetings, study groups, and publications provided forums in which the organization's leading members, including Wall Street bankers and lawyers, prominent politicians, media executives, and academic dignitaries, hammered out U.S. policy directions, including the decision to drop atomic bombs on Japan, which, like, holy shit, that's insane. And the Cold War strategy of containment aimed at the Soviet Union. The CIA-engineered coup that overthrew Guatemala's democratic government was put in motion by Dulles after a CFR study group urged tougher action against Arbenz's left-wing administration. If the CFR was the power elite's brain, then the CIA was its black-gloved fist. I feel like that's kind of what we're getting at with this entire series of episodes, is like, again, talk about these nexus points, but like the CIA is a nexus point for, the bourgeoisie to come together and to be like, hey, this is something that we kind of can't really do with by means of like traditional government, and it needs to be kept quiet or like whatever, or we just need like you to organize some thugs to go in and like kick the shit out of a bunch of banana farmers. And like that's just kind of what the CIA is, and it seems to be necessary for the like maintenance of empire, because things are going to need to be done that like can't be done traditionally. And it's interesting. It's horrifying to think that the CFR is like still around and still shaping public policy. And like, go look up who is on the board now. It's pretty freaky. But like, yeah, talk about nexus points. This was one of them.
Yeah. It's this point in the narrative where Dulles comes back into frame as you say, as this sort of nexal point between peoples. David Talbot is very clearly pointing the finger at Alan Dulles, right?
Yeah.
Alan Dulles has directed this. There is no ambiguity really in what
Yeah.
Talbot is saying. But Talbot also implies that Alan Dulles isn't the kind of person to go rogue.
Yeah.
He is not representative of the highest elite elements of American society. But he's quite able to move in those circles. But he's also the connection point to all of those people below him who cannot find themselves represented in those circles at all. And the way David Talbot presents Alan Dulles' connection to these people is as a kind of like he kind of collects the collective consensus, I suppose, and acts upon whatever the consensus of these elite characters are.
Yeah.
David Talbot describes these people as Alan Dulles' board of directors.
Yeah. Oh, that's so freaky.
Alan Dulles is permitted to exist in all of these circles. He's made heads of all of these foundations, and as you say, like he sits on the Council of Foreign Relations.
Yes. Yeah.
And has all these connections to high society, basically so that he can interpret their whims and wishes. Now, we were having a little debate off mic beforehand. It wasn't really a debate. We don't often disagree. But just debating whether I sort of imagined that he was sort of like reading the room.
Yeah.
But you were suggesting perhaps these people, Alan Dulles' board of directors, had more explicit ways of commanding his actions, or
I
at
think
least
you would
like,
have to be.
Yeah, implying what he ought to do.
You'd have to be specific, but I mean, it might not have taken place at like I fully believe that like at these meetings, the Council of Foreign Relations just goes, we should have tougher action, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, against Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala. But then like maybe like over cocktails at like the Met Club or whatever that night, they're like, we mean fucking like kill him, drown him in his bathtub. Like, you know what we mean. So I don't know. It also kind of doesn't really matter because it's like the directions are coming from here kind of no matter what. Man, how horrifying is that? And again, it speaks to these class dynamics of like Dulles, you think he's like the top of the top, but it's like, yeah, he isn't. Like, you know, we talk about how he was just like a lawyer at Sullivan and Cromwell who was taking directions from Wall Street guys. And it's just like, that's pretty gnarly. It's, man, it's like you always see like the conspiracy theory stuff of like, you know, the people in the shadows, but it's like the people in the shadows, though. It's pretty gnarly.
Should we bring up what one of the Kennedys says about the Rockefellers?
Oh, I remember.
I don't know. Is it JFK that ostensibly says that we Kennedys eat Rockefellers for breakfast or something?
What bullshit. Yeah. Because they're like, hey, aren't you worried about these Rockefellers? And Bobby's like, wow, we eat these Rockefellers for breakfast.
Yeah.
Famous last words.
Allegedly. David Talbot alleges.
Yeah, David Talbot alleges famous last words. I wonder if there are any Rockefellers still kicking around. We should get him on the show. Any DuPonts. All right. So, I mean, I don't know. We've basically set up everything that happens that day, and then the plan just goes forward. It was this consensus amongst the power elite that Kennedy kind of needed to go. He didn't really have anybody to protect him. It was kind of just him and Bobby. And on that day, presumably there were a bunch of gunmen, and I don't know. Like, this just gets into the fine details, but like...
Yeah. I mean, there is another person who Talbot wants to implicate. Apparently, Alan Dulles has a lot of secret meetings with the Treasury Secretary, whose name I've forgotten.
C. Douglas Dillon.
I had no idea that the Treasury Secretary was also responsible for the President's Secret Service.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Yes?
This confused me. This confused me the first time I read it, and I don't remember if I look because he refers to him as C. Douglas Dillon at first, and then when he starts talking about the Secret Service guy, it's Doug Dillon, and I would imagine it's the same guy, but I think that there was a reshuffle in Kennedy's administration, and he was no longer the Treasury Secretary after a certain point, I believe.
I see.
So he was just in charge of like security and stuff like that.
Anyway,
yeah,
I don't know if there is another sort of like elite political figure that David Talbot really wants to point a finger at. It's
him,
Doug Dillon.
Yeah.
Suggesting, I think. It's curious. It's not curious. It's very convenient. A few months before November, Doug Dillon says, I'm going to take a deferred summer holiday. I'm going to go away for this period, and I'm going to come back at like the middle of November, and then I'm going to go on this sort of junket to Japan on the 21st of November.
Yeah. So I'll be in the
So I'll
plane
be on
in
the
case
air,
anybody knows.
and in case anything happens on the 22nd. I'm sure nothing will happen on the 22nd.
Anyway, bye.
And then there's a huge number of questions around the proprietary or what's the opposite of impropriety? Propriety, I suppose. Of the behaviour of the Secret Service on that day.
Yeah.
Whether they were the sufficient distance from the car, whether they ought to be alongside the car rather than so far behind it, how many of them actually followed their instructions to actually try and get to the president, kind of thing.
If you look at the Zapruder film, it seems like none of them gave a fuck.
Yeah.
They're like, damn, he just
There's
got
that one
shot.
guy who's named who sort of chases the car down, kind of thing. But apart from that,
I feel like they should be. Yeah, I don't know.
and there's this horrible piece of later on when evidence is given, I assume to the Warren Commission, there's this horrible piece of disinformation which is suggested that Kennedy wanted the Secret Service to hang back, to be out of frame, so that he could sort of bask in the celebrity that he so ostensibly relished, kind of thing, which is sounds like a horrible piece of disinformation and sort of playing on the sort of like a certain perception of the type of ego character that JF Kennedy had.
It's like the Patrice Lumumba asking for prostitutes. It's like the Mossadegh with his little tiny feet crossed. It's like just talking these people down after they blip them. And dude, the way he frames C. Douglas Dillon's whole story is so funny because like he talks about how in Alan Dulles' like diary in his calendar, like on October 2nd, 1963, he meets with Douglas Dillon and all it says is Douglas Dillon -bankrupts. It's just like, oh no, that can't be a good meeting. The guy in charge of the Secret Service and bankrupts. It's like, whoa.
Bank what?
Reps, like representatives.
Oh, I see. Oh, he's meeting.
Yeah, okay. It's like, oh my God.
Taking his orders.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So things don't go well for Kennedy on that day, do they?
Dealey Plaza.
Dealey Plaza.
It's the 22nd of November, 1963.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what really there is to say about this. It wasn't Oswald. They talk a lot about like the bullets that were. I can read the bit about the ballistics, but like,
yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody knows some elements of this story, right? There were multiple gunmen. The fatal headshot came from the front, not from the back.
Yeah.
How could Oswald have fired these 3 shots in 6 seconds?
The bullets didn't match the gun that he had.
There's the bullet that ostensibly went through Kennedy and then swiveled round and went through the Texas governor and then ended up like hitting some Secret Service agent under a bridge somewhere. There's the bullet that went missing and then was found in a gurney at the hospital. Like
that's the best part because
basically undamaged. Kind of thing.
The bullets don't match like the gun that Oswald supposedly had that they found at the book depository that Oswald supposedly just left on the floor where he had just shot the president.
Yeah.
And basically they say that the correct bullet was found and the bullet type was found on the gurney undamaged where Kennedy was placed. So it's like, okay, clearly some guy just walked up and was like, "Oop," and just like tossed a bullet there. And it's like, come on, try harder.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So there's like, and then there's like the many tens of witnesses who claimed that there were gunshots firing coming from everywhere. There was the smell of smoke. There's the testimony from like police in the area who reckon that the gunshots were ringing out from all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's the fact that there wasn't any like gunpowder residue found on Oswald at all.
Yeah, that he clearly didn't fire a gun that day. That the package that he supposedly bought in that was supposed to be the gun to work that day, everyone he worked with was like, it was very tiny. It couldn't have had a gun in it. And it's also interesting because like Talbot makes the point that like when Oswald gets arrested, he gets arrested in a movie theater. Like he's just vibing in a movie theater. And supposedly I've heard other people basically say that was him. He was supposed to be meeting David Atlee Phillips, who was a CIA handler. And he was like, meet me here. Meet me at this is all just complete speculation, but he was supposed to be like, meet me here. We'll talk about what happened. We'll talk about the next steps. And then David Atlee Phillips just called the cops and was like, oh, it's Oswald. This guy works there. Arrest him now. But also, like, the thing that Talbot says that damns Oswald is that he tries to make a call to, like, Langley, Virginia or something like that. And whoever's on the other line just, like, hangs up and won't talk to him.
It's not even that. He tries to make a phone call late at night, and the switchboard operator in the police station basically doesn't put him through. They say to him that nobody picks up, but actually he doesn't put him through, basically because there are these other two mysterious figures in the room who are like watching what she's doing.
Yeah, it's so gnarly, dude.
But yeah, somebody analysed like his behaviour and the phone call he was making and suggested that was him reaching out to his handler. It's like normal procedure to try and contact
when you're arrested.
Like people who are directing your operation, I suppose. Basically, somebody in the know recognised it as standard CIA behaviour or practice, I suppose.
Yeah. And it's brutal too, because like Talbot doesn't go into too much detail about Jack Ruby, other than his like, you rat, you killed my president, bam, bam. It's all Ruby's insane, but basically just to say that like when confronted about it, Robert Kennedy was like, yeah, I went through his Rolodex and it's like everybody that I indicted for racketeering charges. So like, yeah, you were fucking Jack Ruby was like a crook. Your ancestor plug was like connected to the mafia. Duh.
David Talbot makes the point that Jack Ruby is like, if you wanted to like draw a caricature of a mob hitman, it's Dave Ruby.
Yeah, Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby. And my personal theory is that Jack Ruby was the only person operating under his own recognizance in this entire thing.
Interesting.
Because like he's so cliched.
Yeah.
The kind of character you would pick if you were trying to take out the person who you'd set up to be the fall guy for your presidential assassination. Although the other way to spin it is that like they were just utterly desperate.
Yeah.
Because Oswald wasn't meant to make it out of the
He was supposed to be shot. Like
he was supposed to be killed there. And once he survived, like it was a massive loose end because like obviously if he went to trial, the trial would have uncovered so much stuff kind of thing that they basically had to sort him out.
Yeah, I mean, it's all so crazy, dude.
Yeah, I mean, this is like all the stuff that is kind of known for the most part. Like, you watch Oliver Stone's JFK, like this is the narrative kind of thing. You watch Bill Hicks stand up. This is the narrative. I mean, the other thing that interested me a little bit about this was Alan Dulles' movements at the time.
Oh my god!
I mean,
dude, I know.
He'd recently released a book, right? And he was doing this book tour that was mostly like the West Coast and the East Coast. And then for some reason, he just had hold of these like speaking dates in Texas, mysteriously. But this is kind of another example of him having a very having a constructive narrative around his movements at the time when some operation is going down. He wants some kind of plausible deniability.
Yeah.
But what he does is he goes back to... Maybe he's in Virginia at the time, actually, speaking somewhere. Yeah. And then he goes back into Washington briefly. And then he goes back to Virginia to this mysterious secret CIA base. What's it called? The Farm?
The Farm, yeah.
Which apparently he set up as basically some kind of like black site, secret operations site. I think he also had a home there. And remembering like Alan Dulles wasn't the head of the CIA anymore.
Exactly.
Ostensibly just a civilian. And he was fired by the president. Yeah. And here he is like ostensibly directing CIA activities. He basically spends the entire weekend at this ranch. At the farm, rather.
Yeah, the farm. He's with
allegedly conducting...
pulling the strings.
Pulling the strings, I suppose.
That's so sus.
So whether it's from there that he orders the killing of Oswald, we'll never know. But.
I think, Ruby, I just get the feeling that they were like, holy shit, we need someone to kill Oswald. Who do we have a ton of dirt on? We have a ton of dirt on Ruby. Tell him if he doesn't do this, we'll kill him. And when he gets arrested, we'll get him out of prison. And then he dies of a quick-acting cancer. How odd. I think it is also worth talking about de Gaulle's reaction to all of this, because Talbot talks about how a couple years after de Gaulle died, a memoir is written by one of de Gaulle's like confidants. It's called "It Was de Gaulle." It was published right after his death in 2002. And the book was published in France, but it was never published in full in America. And I'm just going to read a bit from it and see if you can tell.
This is published after the confidant's death, not after
Yes, after confidant's death. Yeah. See if you can tell why this wasn't published in America. After returning from Kennedy's November 24th funeral in Washington, Charles de Gaulle gave a remarkably candid assessment of the assassination of to his information minister, Alan Preferit. Quote, "What happened to Kennedy is nearly what happened to me," confided the French president. "His story is the same as mine. It looks like a cowboy story, but it's not only an OAS story. The security forces were in cahoots with the extremists. And then Preferit asks de Gaulle, do you think Oswald was a front? And he says, everything leads me to believe it. They got their hands on this communist who wasn't one while still being one. He had subpar intellect, was an exalted fanatic, just the man that they needed, the perfect one to be accused. The guy ran away, probably because he became suspicious. They wanted to kill him on the spot before he could get grabbed by the judicial system. Unfortunately, it didn't happen exactly the way they had planned it would. But a trial, you realize, would be just terrible. People would have talked, they would have dug up so much, they would have nearly unearthed everything. The security forces went looking for a cleanup man they totally controlled and who couldn't refuse their offer, and that guy sacrificed himself to kill the fake assassin, supposedly in the defense of Kennedy's memory. Baloney! I think it's funny that he says baloney. What's French for baloney? That's classic. Security forces all over the world are the same when they do this kind of dirty work. As soon as they succeed in wiping out the false assassin, they declare the justice system is no longer needed to be concerned, that no further public action is now needed, and the guilty perpetrator is dead. Better to assassinate an innocent man than to let a civil war break out. Better an injustice than a disorder. America is in danger of upheavals, but you'll see, all of them together will observe the law of silence. They'll close ranks. They'll do everything to stifle the scandal. They'll throw Noah's cloak over these shameful deeds in order to not lose face in front of the entire world. In order to not risk unleashing riots in the United States, in order to prevent a union, to preserve the union, and to avoid a new civil war, in order to not ask questions to themselves. They don't want to know. They don't want to find out. They want to allow themselves to find out. It's pretty fucking insane that de Gaulle said that, dude. That's just like, whoa.
They don't want to find out. They won't allow themselves to find out.
Yeah, exactly. It's so gnarly, man. And I mean, like, that really makes me think, like, what would have happened if it all just came to pieces and it was like, because I don't know, we talked about the business plot and Smedley Butler and all of this is like, you know, fucking all the Bushes were involved with like trying to get rid of FDR and stuff. That like almost came out, and like Smedley Butler came out as being like, hey, this is what these guys paid me to do. They wanted a fascist take over America, and nothing happened because it was all stifled. But like, I don't know. What do you think would have happened in America if this all came out that like, hey, the big bourgeoisie just killed Kennedy? It's pretty fucking crazy, huh?
I don't know, but it's definitely a diagnosis that Bobby Kennedy shared.
Yeah.
That seems to be the reason why he didn't kick up much of a fuss until he decided he would. He was very fearful that basically he just like caused tremendous civil strife in America. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, maybe the whole reason why everybody who had suspicions decided not to act very vehemently on those suspicions was basically just that the deed was done, and we should feel lucky that we still have a democracy intact.
Yeah.
At least some shambolic semblance of one, at least. Maybe we can get these people out in due course, but having a massive reckoning over it now would reveal too much. I mean, maybe it's the same reason why Kennedy was so unable to or unwilling to acknowledge the fact that he wasn't in control of wasn't in control of the American government or the US government. It's a similar kind of thing. Like, how would the American political system endure if it was revealed it was so fundamentally splintered, broken, corrupted?
Yeah.
Like, able to be interfered with in this manner.
Yeah. Well, and we shit talk Kennedy a lot, but it's like people loved Kennedy, dude. Like they did see him as a bit of a hope. And if it was like, hey, the CIA just killed Kennedy, like, I don't know, I could see nothing happening. I could also see like some sort of authoritarian, like, all right.
But I mean, like Kennedy won by like a percentage at least.
True. Yeah.
And Cuba is still such a massive like point of cleavage in American society kind of thing. Well, it's not even that, right? Everybody's just like anti-Castro or anti-Cuba for some reason.
Yeah.
But like at that time, like you can imagine American society splintering along lines of people who actually supported at least some kind of like pseudo-dictatorial or some kind of government that came to power predicated upon an actual active coup, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can imagine there would be a significant constituency who might have supported that kind of thing.
You make a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, I don't know. It's an insane alternate history, but it's also like, is it because he makes the point again that like a couple years after this, like 66% of the American population didn't buy the fucking Warren Report? So it's like, okay, that means nobody had anybody to blame. And so I guess the real question is, if they had people to blame, what would have actually happened then? Like a couple of years later, Bobby Kennedy gets shot. And then like that same year, Martin Luther King gets shot. And it's all the same
Malcolm X.
apparatus. Yeah. Crazy how that just happened. And so I don't know.
Yeah. Like, it makes me wonder, like, how systems can endure when people have such suspicion, but no concrete evidence, I suppose.
Well, that opens us up to a bigger conversation.
What kind of level of evidence would you need, kind of thing?
Yeah, but I mean that leads us to like the question of like, again, the purpose of talking about conspiracy stuff at all, because it's like that energy when nobody trusts the system goes to like when nobody. This is gonna sound like cringy, but like when nobody on the left talks about this stuff, all that energy just goes to like fucking QAnon stuff, and like, you know, like the right wing has a penchant for because they're like the, you know, classic we don't trust the big government guys. Like they have a penchant for sniffing out weird stuff that
except
should
for
be
when we
looked
do,
into.
just as
yeah, exactly. Yeah, fucking Jesus Christ.
Except for when they're prosecuting a war, and then we love them.
Exactly. And then like they sniff out something weird like this and then come to horrible conclusions, whether that's like anti-Semitic shit or whether it's just like insane Hillary Clinton stuff. Because like, you know, you talk about Libya and you talk about like their classic something suspicious was going on in our dealings with Libya, and then they come to the conclusions of like it was Hillary Clinton leaving our people out to die. It's like, no, the suspicious thing was that we were buying weapons from the Libyan rebels and selling them to ISIS. It's like that's the suspicious thing. And I mean, like, I don't know, we've talked about this before, but like the strategic use of some of this stuff is, I don't know, big. It's large and it's omnipresent and hanging over everything. And when you ignore it, all of that energy goes to the right. And like when you read this book, you don't come away trusting capitalism. And obviously, like, I don't know if the word capitalism like comes up once in this book, but like you realize that there is this connection between capital and the state, and how like it's a lot easier, I suppose is what I'm saying, to explain the crazy story of how they killed Kennedy than to explain like the tangential fall of the rate of profit. You know what I mean? And so like, I don't know, maybe that's why we're talking about it. I don't know. People on the left are talking about this stuff now a little bit, so who knows?
Yeah, it's definitely something we need to work on in the future, working out what, not necessarily what the right line is on this, but what a nuanced approach to these kind of discussions are. Like, it's definitely worth engaging with concepts like the deep state.
Sure.
It's definitely worth considering sort of the inertial force that is a state apparatus kind of thing. How norms of society are continued and carried on. It's going to make me sound like a massive liberal in some ways, but one of the things that I was thinking about, both in terms of like the post-Kennedy assassination, but also some aspects of our contemporary situation now, is that like how the narrative is controlled.
Sure.
And there's an extent to which the narrative is controlled in this by the official investigations and how they're manipulated, but also the connection. What really sprung to mind is like the media and journalism. David Talbot's got it in massively for like people who just aren't willing to ask questions along these lines. Yeah. But it sort of comes back to this question that de Gaulle is raising, this thing that's preoccupying Bobby Kennedy as well, is like, and seems to be the same position that the media takes, is like, how much do we need to support the official narrative, and what is motivating our desire to support a particular narrative?
Yeah.
And I guess in all contexts, but in our present context, it provokes for me questions around how does the media fit into the ideological apparatus that is capitalism, I suppose, or more broadly, just like the constitutional or political norms of the various countries that we live in, or even the global order. Like,
yeah.
And how much would it take to have the official story of any incident like this questioned by the media to actually bring it into public consciousness in a way that it had some kind of effect, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
What would it take to take that generalized suspicion that people have and turn it into something that they act upon? Obviously, I don't really want the media to do that.
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to leave it up to the media, obviously. Like, now getting into the realms of more like concrete stuff, right? Moving away from conspiracy theory a little bit, like if we're talking about independent class power, like an independent class and potentially its party would have to get itself in the position where it can define a narrative and construct a narrative and propagate ideas.
Yeah.
And that's the whole purpose around organization and party and stuff. Feel like I've diverged a long way from what we were talking about here.
No, well said.
I don't know.
Well said. I mean, like, I don't know. This is like, maybe just on a more concrete experiential level, this is like the stuff that, you know, the guy at work who's a libertarian and this is the stuff that you come the closest on, because they'll have some sort of JFK conspiracy theory, and they'll recognize that like the state has something to do with it, but it's also like this class, and they'll go back and be like, yeah, you know, man, like the DuPonts and all this stuff and Smedley Butler and all this stuff. And if you have like an actual Marxist approach to this stuff and explain like, you know, why classes operate in the way that they do and how that relates to your material existence, yeah, you can come close to like convincing these people that like it isn't the state, it isn't a big government, you know what I mean? So I don't know. It's definitely worth talking about, and it's definitely worth having a line so you don't just get owned by people who are like, you know.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about this dichotomy, but it is the one you're trying to provoke, right? The idea that either people will draw sensible materialist conclusions about the motivations behind sort of like the actions of a self-conscious class, or they will draw ludicrous and deranged conclusions about like eating children and pedophile rings and I don't know, like ancient aliens and whatever. Like why not direct people toward a materialist analysis of circumstances, even if it's via stories such as this?
100%. And I mean, it is like, I will take it a step further and say like, not why not, but like it is vital, because like when there is a vacuum on the left of talking about stuff like this that was clearly suspicious and clearly not what we were told, you're just leaving it open to like, it's not that you're necessarily immediately leaving it open to the right wing, but you're just leaving it open to anything, and you're leaving it open to just speculation. And when there's no actual voice on the left talking about this stuff, because it's beneath us, and why would we talk about the Kennedy assassination? Who cares what happened to Kennedy? It's like, it's interesting. And yeah, Kennedy, he's a piece of shit, comes from like a long line of like rich pieces of shit, but like, you know, it's fascinating too.
And also like, we've not been mocking, we've always been like elevating the independent researcher.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
In that, like, elevate and celebrate people who are asking questions and looking for answers, and give them a narrative and an answer.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to like our
why
conversations.
mock that? Why?
Absolutely.
Why, like, yeah.
This
like, but we've, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, we all have to like, I don't know, take the red pill at a certain point in time and like step outside of the world that we've been indoctrinated into and ask certain questions. And whether they're questions around how production is actually determinative of the relations of the society in which we live, or whether they're questions around I don't know, how there's a secret cabal of third dimensional aliens that are like, I don't know.
If only that's what we were up against. We were against capitalism. If only it was that simple.
Yeah, it's worse. It's worse.
It's much worse. Yeah, I don't know. It's also just fun. It's also just fun to read about this stuff.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Get this book if you want. Read it if you want. It's great fun.
Can we do have to mention.
There are more things to say, so yeah, we can carry on.
We got to talk about. Really quickly, I just want to say that immediately following the Kennedy assassination, former President Truman wrote a lengthy article saying, hey guys, the CIA is out of control, just saying that.
Unrelated to nothing at all.
Unrelated to what just happened. I just wanted to say we need to get rid of the CIA. We can kind of move on from that, but really quickly, let's also just talk about Bobby Kennedy, because this is almost an afterthought, because it's just like fait accompli, kind of. Talbot makes the point that everyone was kind of waiting to see if, because clearly Bobby Kennedy knew that something was amiss, that it wasn't just this one lone guy. It seemed, Talbot's making the point that like, everyone was waiting to see if Bobby Kennedy would win the primary, and he did, and that night he was murdered. And he brings up
Yeah.
all of this evidence about like Sirhan couldn't have fired all of the bullets that he did because the killing shot was fired from behind him. in the back of the
Ironically, in
head.
this instance, the kill shot came from behind rather than in front,
exactly.
where it was supposed to have come from.
Also, man, how gnarly is the photo in this book of Kennedy's autopsy? It's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Anyway, again, afterthought, Bobby Kennedy, that was like one of the... Actually, I was going to say it's one of the last loose ends they needed to tie up, but it wasn't at all. They were cleaning up loose ends from the Kennedy assassination for a very long time.
Including allegedly dropping a plane on someone's house.
Yeah, exactly. And including allegedly getting Bill O'Reilly to murder somebody. You didn't hear me say that.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that at all. Oh yeah, we can't do that. It's so... Yeah.
Let's just say really quickly, Oswald's CIA handler was probably a guy named George de Mohrenschildt, who was a fucking white Russian, which is really gnarly in itself and a crazy story there. He starts to kind of get cold feet like a decade or so after the actual Kennedy assassination. He does the part that he's supposed to do, and he says everything he's supposed to say, but then he's found with a 20-gauge shotgun wound to the head. And he's found by Bill O'Reilly, which, like, look into that. Independent researchers, look into that. That's all I gotta say. That's fucking nuts.
Okay. We're willing to allege that Bill O'Reilly killed de Mohrenschildt.
Imagine.
And yeah, de Mohrenschildt's death seemed to happen to coincide with a whole load of other people
Getting chopped up and
getting
put in
killed.
suitcases. Oh my! There is so much more to this, and do your independent research because it is so crazy. Even if you just want to stay up late one night and be like, "Whoa, dude!" And the one thing I will say about the independent researcher as well is it kind of almost brings us back. I'm reaching a bit here to our conversation about science and how science operates in capitalism, and that you kind of can't operate outside of these capitalist structures if you're at a university or something like that. That's the closest you're going to get is being an independent researcher. And while many of them are nuts. A lot of them aren't. And I think prior to like certain events of this millennia, a lot of them were like very well, like maybe not well thought of, but like that was just a thing that people did as they looked into stuff, and it was like journalism, and you know, there you go. So yeah, do your independent research, folks. Oof.
There we go.
I'm convinced that Oswald killed Kennedy, by the way. I don't buy any of this. Any of this
It's just
bullshit.
a cool story.
It's just a cool story, man. Oswald did it.
We've enjoyed telling you it.
Dude, I've said this before, but it would have been so funny if we got to the end of this book and he was like, but all the evidence holds up. It was Oswald.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I was thinking about there's a horrible story about Alan Dulles when he and the other members of the Warren Commission are examining the clothes that Kennedy was wearing when he was killed, and when the doctors in the hospital were trying to save him, they cut his tie off.
Yeah.
And Alan Dulles is supposed to have joked when seeing these like blood-stained clothes of Kennedy's. He's supposed to have quipped that, "Hey, look, John F. Kennedy wore a clip-on tie."
Oh my god!
And like, if you needed any more reason to hate Alan Dulles,
that's so gnarly, dude.
I mean, you've got plenty of reasons to hate Alan Dulles. A poor sense of humor is not one of them. But yeah, it's gross.
Also, I just want to throw this out there. Gerald Ford was on the Warren Commission. Oh, and we forgot to say, so was Alan Dulles. Like, duh. Like, Alan Dulles was, like, not in charge of it, but, like, he was in charge of it.
Alan Dulles was in charge of the commission that investigated the killing of John F. Kennedy.
And you'd think everyone would be like, wait a minute, wasn't this guy fired by Kennedy? Why are we letting him on? Whatever. Also,
in the early 70s, Lyndon B. Johnson lied, what's evidently a barefaced lie, by saying that it was actually Bobby Kennedy who asked him to put Alan Dulles on the Warren Commission.
And Bobby Kennedy not saying
5 or 6 years
anything.
after Bobby Kennedy was killed, so he can
exactly.
object.
Oh, by the way, let's tie up that loose end. I have a theory that, well, this isn't a theory, this is just what happened, that Ford is like the first of the, and we've moved on from this because of Trump, but like the first of the, just a goofball kind of guy. And like Reagan was like, he wasn't the goofball who was actually like knew what he was doing, like H.W. Bush and maybe like Bush, just because he was an idiot and like an actor and like he had dementia and like whatever. But I think Ford was like the first of the like, look at him falling down the steps. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's like, he was on the Warren Commission. It's like, what?
Yeah. Talbot describes him as like an ambitious young senator or something.
Yeah.
And like he goes on to be like the clownish president.
Yeah. Oh my god. Was it was
Although like LBJ seems to be like the Philistine president in some ways.
Yeah, sure. But I mean,
maybe it's just compared to the Kennedys. Yeah.
Because it's like they kind of needed someone like that.
Yeah.
It was Ford though when we were doing the Rumsfeld thing where he was like with Ford, right? When there was the assassination attempt. It was Ford, right? Because then they kind of had to cow him into being like, do a little bit of a reshuffle.
Oh, yeah.
He was like, whoa, I just got done with Dulles. I thought I was free. And then there's like this MFer named Rumsfeld. Like, goddamn.
Oh, we were joking that Alan Dulles, Rumsfeld tried to kill Ford. Okay.
Yeah.
Alleging. Joking.
Suggesting. The torch is passed. Yeah, pick up this book, man. It's a lot of pages. But it reads easily, and you can skim it, and
I've been putting it off, and then I've devoured it this week.
Yeah.
There you go.
Partially because you were forced to.
Forced to, of course. The hidden hand of secret pressure of the force of having to podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Next episode, Dan and I will be back.
Back to real time.
Back to real time, yeah.
Podcasting in real time.
No. We're both going on a nice, well-earned vacation, I believe, which will be nice.
I don't know. I think mine's going to be relaxing, although it might be hard work at the same time.
Yeah, true. You will also be
I'm going to be working, but
be a bit hectic.
I'm going to be having fun.
Yeah. And I will be getting away from work. God damn. That's nice. Very, very nice. Nice thing about this country is that they give you time off and they pay you for it. It's very nice. Yeah. All right. Well, we solved the Kennedy assassination, Dan. Didn't think we'd be doing that.
There we go.
We started the show.
What next?
What next? Oh, I know what's next. We won't bring up what's next, but I know what's next. I'd like to talk to some of these independent researcher types that still exist and just kind of see how they view themselves. You know what I mean? Especially in a like QAnon world. The people who are like, I don't know, at least somewhat more level-headed. It's interesting.
That's a really good idea.
All right.
I like that.
Yeah. Let us know if you're a researcher. Oh, we've been recording for 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh my god.
All right. Well, I'm more than ready to say that my name's been Jack. This series, Dan, has rocked and it's been very fun. And we'll be doing something like it again. Look at us, we finished another book too.
Hey, and a big one at that.
And a big one in it.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to have finished this. It's been and in this manner, in this fashion, at this time.
At this time.
It's been a constant companion, I suppose.
Yeah.
Looming tome, threatening from the sidelines to force its way onto our podcast agenda. And maybe I'll be bereft without its constant presence.
If Kennedy had known that in dying he would have bought us this much joy, I think he would have let himself get shot. Butterfly effect, isn't it?
Yeah, that is the timeline in which we live.
Yeah, goodness. All right, well, I've been Jack, and see ya.
I've been Dan. Go forth and research. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The music you heard this episode was Music to Kill Bad People To by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If you like this song, you can check it out and much, much more on their Bandcamp at kinggizzard.bandcamp.com. Be sure and follow us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you liked what you heard, be sure and tune in next week for some more commie discussion. Till next time.